They didn't even look at the medical tag, didn't ask. Just reached in, grabbed the pouch, and walked away, like they were taking out the trash. At 36,000 feet, surrounded by silence and strangers, 16-year-old Imani Fields watched her future disappear into a flight attendant's clenched white fist. She didn't cry. Not at first. She just held her breath like she had when her lungs used to fail her, because it felt like the only thing she could still control. The clouds outside were soft as linen, stretching over the American Midwest in pale silence. Inside, seat 14A, time moved slower. Her father, Dr. Malcolm Fields, tried to focus on the distant farmland below, but his mind wouldn't settle. Even before the incident, he'd sensed it. The way the attendant scanned the cabin like she was guarding a vault, not serving passengers. The way her gaze paused just a little too long on his daughter. Imani's hands, delicate and calloused from years of hospital IVs, trembled as she turned toward him. "Dad, my wrists are locking up again." He knew what that meant. The inflammation was creeping back. They had a small window, maybe 15 minutes, to get ahead of it. The medication had to stay cold, had to be injected slowly. Any delay could tip the balance. Malcolm reached beneath the seat, slid the carry-on toward him with his foot, and carefully unzipped the side pocket. Inside, nested in foam and gel packs, were 4 syringes of custom-formulated protein therapy. Fragile, uninsurable, worth nearly $20,000, and her dream of walking into Stanford orientation without a wheelchair. He caught the attention of the flight attendant as she passed. Her name tag read, Rebecca. Short blonde hair, lips set in permanent disapproval. She looked at him like she expected a complaint. "Excuse me," Malcolm said gently. "My daughter needs her medication now. May we have a cup of water, please?" She paused. "We'll be serving drinks shortly. It's urgent. I have documentation." He motioned to the folder on his tray table. Rebecca's eyes slid down to the pouch in Imani's lap. Her tone shifted, taut with suspicion. "What's in the bag?" "Temperature-controlled biologics," Malcolm replied, still calm. "Approved by TSA, pre-cleared. I can show—" But she was already leaning in, speaking louder than necessary. "Ma'am, I need to inspect that." Imani froze. Her fingers clutched the pouch instinctively, her whole body shrinking against the window. Malcolm's voice dropped an octave. "You don't have authorization to handle this. It's medical property under federal protection." Rebecca didn't flinch. She didn't ask. She simply reached forward and ripped the bag out of Imani's hands. "No!" The word was too soft, too late. Passengers nearby looked up, confused, silent, watching. Rebecca held the bag like it was radioactive, already halfway down the aisle before anyone could move. Imani's breath hitched. "Dad! She took it!" Malcolm's body went still. Rage and fear tangled in his chest, but he didn't yell. Couldn't. He knew what would happen if he did. Black man, enraged, plain. Headlines write themselves. "I'll get it back," he said. He kissed Imani's forehead, unbuckled his seatbelt, and stood. But inside, something ancient had just been torn open. Because this wasn't just about the medicine anymore. This was about what she saw when she looked at his daughter, and what she refused to see. Dr. Malcolm Fields moved down the narrow aisle, every step deliberate, every breath carefully measured. The walls of the aircraft felt too close, too bright, too white. He passed row after row of indifferent faces, some curious, some nervous, none brave enough to speak. The curtain at the front of the cabin swayed slightly. Beyond it, he could hear her voice. Sharp, confident, falsely professional. Rebecca wasn't reporting a concern. She was rewriting the narrative. Her words floated back toward him like smoke. Unidentified fluid. Refused to cooperate. Suspicious behavior. He pushed the curtain aside. Rebecca stood in the galley, the pouch in one hand, her other gesturing animatedly to a man in an older uniform. He had silver hair, a captain's badge, and a look that said he was already tired of the conversation. "She wouldn't tell me what it was," Rebecca was saying. "No label, No paperwork. Honestly, it looked like something smuggled. Malcolm didn't shout. He didn't have to. "That's my daughter's medication," he said. His voice was low, controlled, terrifying in its clarity. Both of them turned. The captain, Captain Hughes, his tag red, raised an eyebrow. "I have all the documentation. TSA cards, prescription notes. It's FDA approved, temperature sensitive. If you open that pouch, you'll find 4 biologic syringes sitting between gel packs. That's what you're holding." The pouch, still in Rebecca's hand, trembled slightly. Captain Hughes looked at her. "Is this true?" "He didn't show me anything." "I tried," Malcolm snapped, the first crack in his voice. "But she wasn't interested in facts, just assumptions." The captain sighed and reached for the pouch. "Let me take a look." "No," Rebecca blurted suddenly. "It could be contaminated. I was about to dispose of it." Time slowed. Malcolm took a step forward. "If you throw that away, you are committing medical sabotage. That's not hyperbole. That's legal terminology." But she was already turning. The small chute in the galley wall opened with a soft mechanical hiss. A tiny door meant for trash. A sound meant to be harmless. Instead, it was a trigger. "Don't," Malcolm said, his voice cracking for the first time. "You don't understand." Rebecca looked at him, at the pouch, and then, like she had just won an argument, she dropped it in. It vanished with a faint metallic clink. Gone. For a moment, Malcolm couldn't hear the engines, couldn't feel the floor. The fluorescent lights above seemed to blur. Rebecca straightened. "It's been disposed of according to FAA protocol for unverified substances." The captain blinked. You threw it out?" "I followed procedure," she said. But her voice had changed. The confidence was cracking. Malcolm stared at the wall. His mind was moving in 2 directions at once, one calculating the logistics of survival, the other mourning the future just erased. "That was an $18,000 treatment," he said, barely breathing. "Custom compounded. Irreplaceable mid-air. You didn't throw away medicine. You threw away her safety, her stability, her Stanford acceptance letter. You just set her body on fire from the inside out." Captain Hughes opened his mouth to speak, but Malcolm had already pulled out his phone. His fingers moved fast. Muscle memory from years of navigating life and death charts. He brought up the PDF, held it inches from their faces. "There. Read it. The chemical breakdown. The shipping protocol. My signature. Her physician's clearance. You threw away the only 4 syringes she had left." Captain Hughes paled. We had no idea." Malcolm's stare hardened. "That's exactly the problem." Behind him, the curtain swayed again. Imani's voice, thin, afraid, called out from row 14. "Dad?" He turned. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, but the first casualty of this war had already been declared. Trust. Imani's hands felt colder than the plane's recycled air. Her mother, Lena, tried to warm them between her own, whispering something soft, but Imani didn't hear it. All she could see was the aisle curtain, and the silence behind it. Her father had gone after her medicine, after Rebecca, after justice. And he hadn't come back yet. She leaned her head against the window. The clouds outside had changed. No longer linen white, but slate gray. Flat. Ominous. Across the aisle, a man who'd been quiet the entire flight leaned toward Lena. White, maybe in his 50s. Wedding ring. Kind eyes. "I saw the whole thing," he said gently. "She didn't do anything wrong. Neither of you did. That woman, she's on a power trip." Lena nodded, clutching Imani's shoulder as if to keep her from disappearing. "Thank you," she whispered. Before more could be said, the curtain parted. Malcolm returned, and everything about his posture said something had gone terribly wrong. His shoulders weren't just heavy. They were leaden. His eyes didn't search for a solution. They searched for the right way to deliver a wound. "It's gone," he said. Imani blinked. "What do you mean?" "Rebecca threw it into the disposal chute." "No." The word tumbled from her mouth like broken glass. No, she wouldn't. She couldn't. Lena covered her face. A tiny sound escaped her. A mother's helpless cry muffled by the need to stay strong. It's okay, Malcolm lied. I'll fix this. But as he sat down, the reality settled like frost on glass. There was no fixing this. The flare-ups would come within hours, stiffening joints, burning skin, muscle tremors. Without the injections, her body would betray her again. The same body she'd fought to reclaim for 3 years. The same body she'd trained to walk into a Stanford lab like she belonged there. The same body someone just decided didn't matter. The minutes dragged. Then, footsteps. The lead flight attendant approached, older than Rebecca, and clearly rattled. She stood beside a man in a crisp uniform with 4 gold stripes on his shoulders. Captain Hughes. His voice was calm, practiced, meant to soothe. Dr. Fields, he said. I understand there was a misunderstanding. Malcolm's jaw tightened. No, he said. There was no misunderstanding. Your flight attendant made an assumption, ignored medical documents, and destroyed life-saving medication. Hughes folded his arms. She claims you were non-compliant. I offered proof. She didn't care. She saw a black teenager with a bag and made up her own story. The captain sighed. Look, we're 2 hours from landing. Once we reach San Francisco, you can get a replacement. Lena spoke up, her voice sharp and trembling. This medication can't be replaced like toothpaste. It takes days to formulate. It requires a lab and pre-approval. It's her immune system's lifeline. Hughes looked annoyed. What would you have me do? We can't go back to New York. We don't have fuel for that. Malcolm leaned forward, slow and deliberate. Divert. Land in Denver, Chicago, anywhere with a major medical center. That's not protocol for a stable passenger, Hughes replied. Malcolm's tone dropped to something colder. She won't stay stable. There was a pause, thick, heavy. And then a voice from 3 rows back broke the tension. I'm streaming this, a young woman said calmly. Her phone was held up, recording. Tens of thousands are watching. They just saw you say no to a black girl in medical distress. Just so you're aware. The captain turned, eyes wide. Malcolm didn't move. His voice, when it came, was ice. You're not flying this plane anymore, Captain. You're flying a PR nightmare. And your next words better be the right ones. The air in the cabin shifted. Something bigger had just taken off. Captain Hughes stood still, caught in a silence he couldn't navigate. The words, PR nightmare, echoed louder than the engines now. The phone's lens pointed toward him like a loaded weapon, and the young woman holding it, pink hair, steady hand, didn't blink. Her stream was live, and he could already feel the heat building behind the screen. Malcolm didn't move. He didn't need to. I am formally declaring my daughter unfit for continued flight, he said. As her physician and legal guardian, I'm documenting that you are knowingly transporting a passenger into a preventable medical crisis. The captain's lips parted, then sealed again. You have 2 options, Malcolm continued, voice still low. Option 1, you contact dispatch, declare a medical incident, and divert immediately. Option 2, you continue this flight, and I make sure the FAA, the NTSB, and every major news outlet in the country knows that you gambled a child's life against your schedule. The tension snapped like dry wire. Hughes turned to the lead attendant. Get on the radio. Find the nearest viable airport. A murmur rolled through the cabin, passengers whispering, reacting. Some craned their necks to look back at Imani, who now sat pale and silent, a quiet storm brewing beneath her skin. Rebecca didn't return. She remained up front, likely realizing the cost of what she'd done. 15 minutes later, Hughes returned. His voice was different now, flat, clipped. We're diverting to Denver. Prepare the cabin for landing. A chorus of groans filled the air. Complaints, curses, the sound of disrupted lives. Unbelievable, one man muttered. Missing my brother's wedding for this. Bet they're not even sick, someone hissed. Malcolm sat straight, shielding Imani with his frame. Lena reached across, held her daughter's hand, and tried not to break. But then, a voice from across the aisle. "I gave my statement," the white lawyer from earlier said, loud enough to be heard. "Told the crew what I saw. The girl was calm. The family was respectful. The flight attendant escalated." He looked at Malcolm. "My name's Martin, civil rights attorney. You need help, call me. No charge." Malcolm took the card, held his gaze. "Thank you." The plane began its descent. Behind them, the girl with the live stream, Jessa, kept broadcasting. "If you're just tuning in," she said to her audience, "you're watching racism at 35,000 feet. A black teen's medication was thrown out by a flight attendant. Her father, a doctor, demanded justice. And now, this entire flight is grounded. This is what happens when prejudice gets institutional backup." Imani closed her eyes, the vibrations of the plane shaking her bones like faint thunder. Her muscles had already begun to tighten. Pain was inching closer. She felt it the way a sailor senses a storm long before the sky turns. And Malcolm knew it too. Every minute now was precious. As the wheels touched down in Denver, a strange silence fell over the plane. Not relief, just suspended judgment. The cabin lights flickered, and the seatbelt sign chimed. But before anyone could stand, the captain's voice returned. "For the Fields family in row 14, please remain seated. Medical and security personnel will be boarding shortly." Another murmur, another wave of stares. The price of justice was isolation. Passengers filed out slowly. Some avoided eye contact. Others glared. One woman spat. "Hope your little protest was worth it." Imani flinched. But then, Jessa paused beside them. "I'm staying," she said softly. "They need to see what happens next, too." Malcolm nodded once. Just enough. Because this wasn't the end of anything. This was the start of the reckoning. The jet bridge hissed open, and with it came uniformed paramedics, corporate security, and a man in a loosened tie who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. Behind them, clinging to her composure like it was all she had left, was Rebecca. Imani sat still, her legs numb, her head pulsing from fatigue. The inflammation had started. Not a flare yet, but a low fire beneath her skin. Her face was calm, but only because she'd learned long ago how to smile through pain. The lead paramedic knelt beside her. "Hi, sweetheart," she said gently. "I'm Linda. Can you tell me how you're feeling?" "She needs a hospital," Malcolm answered for her. "University of Colorado has a rheumatology unit. She needs to be evaluated before this escalates." The airport official stepped forward. His badge read, V. Ramirez, Operations Director. His voice was pure PR silk. "Dr. Fields, we're working on arranging transport, but there are serious matters we need to clarify." Malcolm turned to face him. "You want to clarify something? Start by explaining why your airline destroyed $18,000 of temperature-sensitive biologic medication, without cause, without protocol, and without consequence." Ramirez hesitated. "We have reports of a disturbance, of non-compliance." "No," Lena interrupted. "You have a cover-up in progress." Malcolm reached into his coat, pulled out Martin's card, and held it up. "There's a lawyer, a live witness, a video stream watched by over 100,000 people. If your concern right now isn't my daughter's vitals and your company's liability, you're in the wrong room." Then his voice softened. But it hit harder. She's 16. She should be celebrating a dream, not being treated like a threat. All eyes turned to Rebecca. She stood at the rear of the group, her face pale, arms folded across her chest like armor. Her lips quivered, just once. "I have a son," she murmured, so low only Malcolm could hear. He got into drugs. I saw the pouch. I panicked." Malcolm stared at her for a long moment. There was no rage in his expression, just clarity. "Your trauma is real," he said flatly, "but you used it like a weapon. You didn't see a threat. You saw a stereotype, and you acted on it." Rebecca didn't respond. She looked at Imani, truly looked, for the first time, then lowered her eyes. Ramirez fumbled with his phone. We're arranging a private ambulance and overnight accommodations for your family. You'll also be covering every medical bill, Malcolm added, every hotel night, and every cent this diversion cost. That's not a request, that's the floor. Linda nodded at the paramedics. Vitals are elevated, blood pressure's rising. She's stable, for now. But not for long. They wheeled Imani down the jet bridge as Lena walked beside her, holding her hand like a lifeline. The hallway was lined with passengers who had stayed behind. Jessa, still live streaming. A few airport staff, even a local news crew, and they clapped. Not out of celebration, but solidarity. A soft, quiet rhythm of human decency rippling through a place that had forgotten how to feel. Malcolm followed behind, his steps slow, each one heavier than the last. He glanced back once, toward Rebecca, now flanked by corporate security, her future unraveling 1 second at a time. But he felt no satisfaction. This wasn't revenge. This was a reckoning. And it wasn't over yet. 6 months later, the air outside was colder, crisper. Baltimore's winter whispered against the windows of the Fields' home. But inside, life had begun to move again. Imani sat near the fireplace, her legs tucked under a wool blanket, laptop open in her lap. A Stanford hoodie hung off her shoulder, a gift from the university that now called her back with open arms. Her health had stabilized, barely. The Denver specialists had intervened just in time. The relapse, when it came, had been sharp, but manageable. Still, it left a mark. Her dream hadn't died. It had just changed shape. The Stanford scholarship remained intact. But now, it came with more. A summer research seat, a full academic mentorship, a personal letter from Dr. Evans himself. But that was only half the story, because Malcolm Fields hadn't stopped with survival. He had pulled the curtain back and refused to let it close again. The lawsuit filed against the airline made national headlines. With pro bono backing from civil rights attorneys, witness testimony, and the full force of Jessa's viral stream, which by now had over 8 million views, Malcolm didn't just demand compensation. He demanded reform. The airline fought. Of course they did. They tried to spin it, settle it quietly, reframe the narrative. But they hadn't counted on the receipts, video, documents, witnesses. They hadn't counted on a quiet black doctor who could quote aviation protocol better than their own legal team. They hadn't counted on America watching. In the end, they folded. The settlement was historic, not just in numbers, though those were staggering, but in terms. A complete overhaul of their staff training programs, new federal compliance protocols on medical handling. And one more clause, a permanent in-flight training module on implicit bias, de-escalation, and disability awareness. Its name? The Imani Fields Protocol. But even that wasn't the final note. With a portion of the settlement, the Fields family founded something new. The Wings of Imani Foundation, a nonprofit that helps children with rare autoimmune diseases access treatment, travel, and advocacy. Dozens of families had already received aid. More would follow. Imani didn't want to be famous, but she didn't want to be silent either. So she wrote essays, articles, a TEDx talk. Not about what was taken from her, but what the world needed to stop taking from kids like her. Rebecca never worked again. Her name became a case study in corporate liability. In court, her search history was subpoenaed. Dozens of entries on teens smuggling drugs. Forum posts about addiction. Fear masquerading as vigilance. But no one, not even herself, could deny what had really happened that day. She had looked at a sick black girl and seen danger, and the world saw her do it. That was the real ending. Not a clapback, not a courtroom verdict, but a shift. Now, every time a flight attendant asks about a medical pouch, every time a doctor advocates in the sky, every time a young girl with chronic illness boards a plane without fear, Imani is there, not in protest, but in precedent. Not in anger, but in change. As she closed her laptop and stared out the frosted window that night, she thought about the clouds, about the altitude where everything had fallen apart, and where everything had begun. And for the first time since that day, she smiled. Because what had started in silence